Hi everyone, welcome to Casual Watch Talk Live. Thank you so much for joining us here on Tuesday. I'm joined by Pete McConville. Thank you so much for joining us, or joining me. There's only two of us here. We were kind of struggling for a subject, weren't we? So what we think we're going to do is think back on the year and see if we can recall all of the interesting watches or little watch kind of dramas that there were, but without Googling them to see whether they still bother us. I think that's quite a good, good topic. Should we do a wristwatch check, Pete?
We should. Yep. I actually thought about this. Sorry, I should remember to always take my watch off first. On the last time I was on, I think I came across as an awful snob saying I only bought really expensive watches. So I deliberately chose today to wear a Seiko.
I really like
quartz nonetheless.
Yeah, I really like that one. There's a blue variant of that I have got a search on. There's a blue variant of that with those hands, and I've got a search consistently on it for Chrono 24 because I want to try and get it below $1,000, and I think they're well above that now. There was a time that they were below, and I bid on a few on eBay, and then I ummed and ahed about it. But yeah,
that one's really rare. It's really odd in that I do not like the traditional hands that they have on that. I like the big broad arrow hand. So yeah, I've been searching for the big broad arrow hand version. And I love the really heavily domed crystal. So for me, this is my favorite version. I think it all went downhill after this one.
Yeah, so what have you got? I'm wearing the Seiko speed timer. So I actually uploaded a YouTube short today because Uncle Seiko has made a clasp for it, and it's got an extra position of micro adjustment because the Seiko one only has 2 positions of micro adjustment.
Okay.
So he's made one that's got an extra one. It was only $10 plus. I think it looks a lot better than the Seiko one. Yeah, I've just finished the review of this. I'll probably be uploading it the next couple of days. So get my thoughts on this Seiko speed timer, but I do like it. I also got another watch in for review as well, which I could probably do a unboxing, couldn't I, live? Just bear with me 1 second.
So while Sam's off, I'll ask people in the comments if you've got an idea of what were the big issues, big dramas, big things that struck you, put it in the comments and then we'll see, do we remember that at all? And perhaps throw our 2 cents into the ring.
Yeah, exactly. I think this is a great topic because it's forcing us to remember whether we actually really did get upset or not. Yeah, so...
I was going to say, I'll place a bet that I can say one word and then launch Sam on a rant and probably fill up the rest of this. So I think I'm pretty confident he'll remember this one.
So I got very kindly sent in for review a Zodiac from Mike Pearson. So it's the Super Seawolf one. So okay. I mean it doesn't have a date on it. So I mean that's already a. No, it's a very nice watch. So yeah, I got to borrow one of these for a review, so I'll be uploading that one soon. So big thanks to Mike Pearson and the Zodiac team for lending me that one. Well, should we kick this off then? So how do you want to do it? Do you want to say one drama and I'll say one, or do you want to how do you want to do it?
I'll lead off with mine because Bruno's already said it. So, Sam, what do you think of the idea of MoonSwatches and not being available online?
Oh yeah, I mean, do you know what? I'm at the stage now. I'm at that stage where they say if you have to, if you're married, there's a point where you have to divorce somebody, and it's when you're not angry with them anymore. There's just like apathy, like you just actually don't muster an emotion about somebody else, and that apparently that's the one thing you can never turn back from. You can get over arguments and go to counselling, but if you just don't care, then that's very hard. And I think that's firmly where I'm at. I haven't looked on the Swatch site to see if they're even available. I'm guessing they're not available on the Swatch site.
They are. No, I don't believe they are. It is clearly, and Bruno's right, I think it is the story of 2023. what year are we? 2022, the
Yeah.
MoonSwatch, and it raised so many really big questions like, can a brand do something like this? Does it cost the brand something? And I mean, probably Omega, we're talking about there. It raised some really interesting questions about, for me, does Swatch even know how to sell a watch? I'm confident that Swatch organization knows how to sell them, to make them, but I don't think they know how to sell a watch.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? Because it definitely, I mean, James Duffy exactly the same. Said, if I cared about any of the drama, I don't anymore. I wanted a MoonSwatch, but I changed my mind. Yeah, it's obvious it's obvious that they tried to do a bit of shock and awe before Watches and Wonders, didn't they? And I think they had to have got totally surprised by the response to it, because I mean, even I bought a rare Swatch, a Mickey Mouse, a limited edition one that was sold out in seconds. But the actual going to the store and stuff like that was, I imagine it just blew them away. Like they had no comprehension that was going to happen.
Yeah, well, the story that Andrew from on About Effing Time tells of where, as they're getting ready for the big reveal and they bring people in and he was saying they don't have like a press release ready and say, this is what we're going to say. Instead, they said, well, we've come up with this idea. Is it going to work? What should we do? And this is like days before the release. Yeah, I think they had no idea what they were going to do. It does raise a really interesting question, another one, and it's kind of hooked on some of these things that people are saying in the comments as well. And it's more about us than necessarily the watches, in that Swatch has never made any bones about it. This is not going to be a limited release. It's going to be around for years. Yeah. So if you can buy one next year, you can probably buy one in 2024. We can probably buy one in 2025. And yet we, the watch community, is saying we weren't able to get our sugar hit, therefore I'm no longer interested. And it's like we're really quick to analyze what Swatch is doing and how they're satisfying our need. But for me, that says something completely really interesting about us. That is, if we can't get the shiny toy within 6 months, we lose interest. We move on. And yet we're the first people to yell at brands for saying, why are you giving us limited editions? Why are you putting out new watches every year? Why are you constantly churning? Well, I think our reaction to the MoonSwatch is the perfect reason why.
Yeah, I don't think you're wrong, and I'll admit this about myself. If I had managed to buy one that day one, I can almost guarantee with 90% certainty that I would have eBayed that thing by now. I would have worn it for a bit and liked it, but it would have totally gone on eBay. I mean, my opinion was that if I think I could have gone back in time and advised Swatch at the very start of it, would be to not have as many different colors as they had. They could have made more. They could have had 4 or 5 core colors and then made more of those. But I think what took everyone by surprise as well, and I don't know if you've felt this, Pete, but I owned a speed timer, and it felt cool because it had the NASA. It had the NASA connotations to it, but nobody really in the wild knew what the speed timer was. No random stranger would be like, oh, that's a Speedmaster. They might notice a Rolex or whatever, but the speed timer, it felt like, oh, this is a precision tool the astronauts use, but also only real watch people will really know what it was. And I think what overwhelmed people was that when they released this MoonSwatch, which could have totally gone under the radar, couldn't it? That all these tens of thousands of people were suddenly made aware of this icon of Omega, but in like it just felt like a dirty way. It just felt like this is such a cool watch that now it's been cheapened. But by all accounts, it was an ace for Omega in general, wasn't it? I think.
Yeah. So the report, absolutely. The reports are that Omega sales went up, not just of the MoonWatch, but of all Speedmasters and in fact all Omegas. So I think that, it did really go well. Some people here are talking about how poorly made it was. That's probably true. I mean, I handled one. It's a pretty terrible watch. But I think it also, the other thing I think it revealed about us is, particularly watch geeks, is coolness and design, and whether something is really fun is kind of our kryptonite. Yeah. I can throw a watch in front of you. We can, and I've been on podcasts where we've done this. We look at the watch and we go, what's the brand? What's the material? What's the movement? What's the crystal? What's the bezel? Okay, this watch should be X. And we never ask ourselves, but how cool is this watch and how many people are going to want it? Because we feel uncomfortable doing that. And the MoonSwatch is our kryptonite because it's made from junk and it's, not a great movement, and it's a plastic, crystal that can scratch itself. And every test we use says it should be $50, but it is just so cool.
It is cool. I mean, I really like the taupe one. I think it was Mercury or whatever. But yeah, it was a very interesting, like, social phenomenon, wasn't it? Because suddenly we're in this, we're in this small community of watch collectors that know about the speed timer and know the history, and then suddenly there's like moles full as if it was, some high, like a streetwear brand like Supreme or something like that. When they do a drop in it just overwhelmed people. And then I think it turned, I mean, it was interesting the first day, but then it turned a little bit nasty, didn't it? The police turning up and then people flipping them on eBay. It's funny because we get a little taste of that in Orlando because there's certain merchandise that the Disney parks release that is coveted. And I think they don't really know which ones are gonna, some of the stuff they like force scarcity to build them up, but other stuff, they had a popcorn bucket that was in the shape of one of the characters of one of the parks, and there was 7-hour queues for this one popcorn bucket. They just managed to hit it right, but they release a new popcorn bucket every couple of months, so they had no real idea that was going to happen. And I get that with Swatch, and then I think the silliness afterwards with the CEO kind of being like, "Oh, we're going to keep these as an exclusive."
And that brings me back to the idea that, Mr. Hayek knows how to build a great watch. He has no idea how to sell it. He shouldn't be allowed to talk to the media. He's just terrible. Yeah, I think we've done the MoonSwatch. I think we've done the MoonSwatch to death. Over to you. What's your big topic or thing?
So, the one thing that I still think back on, and I think back on it because everyone that's very kindly subscribed to the channel, thank you so much. And if you're not subscribed, please subscribe. But there's a few videos that I've made where I've shared my opinion on a watch, and where it's not been favorable. And it's just a weird quirk of YouTube that the ones that are more unfavorable of a watch actually more audiences will watch it. And there's comments. I have a Shinola video that I made it 4 years ago or something, and it still consistently gets more comment, usually from Shinola owners who took umbrage with what I've said. But at that particular time, I put all of because I was referencing like court. They got sued by the FTC, or they got hauled in front of the FTC, and loads of other stuff. And I've referenced all the articles and everything in the description. But people, it's funny. They have this immediate reaction, and then when I sort of chat to them, there's not a lot of we have quite a good conversation. But the long story short, the one video that I made, and I meant it, was about this watch, and it was about this SLA 055. So this was a $4,600 Seiko that was released, but it's not a spring drive. It is not a Grand Seiko. It's a normal Seiko. It had the 8L35 movement in it, which is undecorated Grand Seiko. I know there's an argument about that. And I made a video saying that this was clearly an experiment that Seiko were doing, and it was way overpriced for what it was. Do you remember this one, Pete? This
yes,
watch?
I do. I would agree. I think I did a video on the same thing, and I said I thought it was overpriced. I wouldn't have said way. and part of that is because I'm not sure about some things about this watch. For example, and it's an interesting one. If you bring the photo up again, a lot of people were saying, and it was really expensive because you can't even get it on a bracelet. But from what I understand, there's actually a really good reason why you can't get it on a bracelet. If it did come on a bracelet, it'd be about $7,000 because they actually do use proprietary steel, which is really expensive. And that was the sort of the topic that you and I were talking about before about, do we believe companies when they tell us things like it's a proprietary steel? Or do we actually think they're just flat out lying? Which I actually think is pretty rare. I think that someone embellishes the truth or doesn't quite say everything probably happens all the time. But that someone says this is proprietary when it's not, I reckon that's probably pretty unlikely. Because that's a crime.
Yes, that's true. And it's funny. I listen to a really funny, every Saturday there's a legal, a lawyer that has a radio station. It's based in LA. And I listen to him because people phoning with their legal issues. But he always has these class action lawsuits. You know, I think Australia was the one with the Subway, wasn't it? Where they tried to sue because the Subway sandwich was less than 1 foot or something.
Oh, but, I can't remember.
Yeah. So, but yeah, the thing with this watch was, to me, it was clearly a stretch. Like, yeah, it was a nice steel that I think it was it ever shine? It had like an Omega-esque name to the metal.
It's ever the reason that
ever brilliant steel or something. Pete and I have agreed not to go back and search on the internet, so I'm doing a lot of this from memory. But what is consistent with the comments in that video is that a lot of people agree, but also a lot of people disagree, and they agreement surfaces around we think it is worth the money. But when you sort of probe and dig a little bit deeper, the handful of people that actually bought the watch all bought it at a big discount. Because this watch can be had for $3,200. Some of the Japanese sites have it. eBay, about $3,500. eBay had a second-hand one for $3,200, and that guy had paid the full whack for it because he bought it from an AD. So my argument is, well, you can agree or disagree with what I said, but the market decided. It just so happened that the market decided it was also way overpriced for what it was. And I find that funny that even the people that disagree with me that bought it, they bought it at a discount. Because I'm thinking, well, why didn't you pay for the full price? Because even you in the back of your mind were thinking, you've got to be a conscientious watch buyer. So you have to try and seek out the lowest price, but then don't argue that it was worth that original price, I guess. But I don't know, what's your opinion on that?
It's an interesting one. I kind of agree with you. I don't use the word worth that much because it's so hard to know, and there's some really interesting questions which I want to tease out on my channel one day about what goes into what a watch costs. And just because you don't value what someone had to pay doesn't mean that you're getting ripped off, because that's part of the cost, if you know what I mean. I mean, you might not value a 5-year warranty, but the fact that you don't value it doesn't mean you're getting ripped off because someone provided it and that's built into the price. You might not value that this is an original design. You might be quite happy to buy someone's knockoff of an original design, but that doesn't mean you're getting ripped off when someone builds the price of design into their original. And it's
I think you're right. I think I say ripped off quite a bit just because it especially in comments. YouTube is all about being a little bit cheeky with your wording, so you can get to it. So, but yeah, I mean, you're never truly ripped off for a conscious purchase. I mean, you're never if you're consciously buying a watch and you research it, then you never truly. I suppose a true rip off is like, like the energy crisis in the UK at the moment, where the energy bills are going up and you've got no choice. I think some of those things are perhaps actual rip-offs where you're forced into it. But yeah, you're right. If it's still a luxury purchase, and to be honest, I think that watch is worth $3,000, and I say that or 3,000 to 3,500. I think it is worth that. It's just that to me, it was Seiko. It was a little test in the market, and the thing is, even though it was limited edition, they're still readily available for new, and that is rare because it's been out probably 9 months, 10 months.
Yeah.
So if they'd hit that sweet spot with it, I can't see how it would be limited edition.
Yeah, another interesting quirk, and I don't know if it's relevant to this watch at all, but it certainly is to a brand I follow a lot, Breitling, which is MS. I think Americans expect to get discounts. They expect it. If you don't, and I remember from when I was living there, if someone doesn't offer you a discount, you feel like you're being ripped off. And Breitling MSRPs in America are consistently 20%, 10 to 20% higher than anywhere else in the world. And I suspect they price it to give you a discount.
Yeah, it's funny because they have when buying a car in the US is a unique experience because for a starter, you can literally buy the car and drive off with it, which in the UK you can't. The UK, you go in, you do your finance and everything, and you go away and they're like, "Oh, we're detailing it," and "Oh no, will you come back for a week?" Because I think they're just seeing what happens.
Same here.
Yeah, and but a lot of I don't know if this is just a Florida thing, but I don't think it is. But there's a lot of the car things that are like, "This is our haggle-free price. You don't like to haggle, so we always give you the fair price." And I still haggled on that, but it's funny, like you say that it's if you're building in the discount and then discounting it, are you really getting a discount? I suppose
I was looking at a watch because we were having a discussion online about a Breitling, and someone said, this new Breitling is available at a 30% discount on JomaShop. And I said, no, it's not. And then there's a negotiation tactic, when you can't prove something, make a bet on it. You think something's going to go up, they think it's going to go down. Well, let's bet on it. And so I said to this guy, okay, so if you can buy me that watch at 30% off what I would normally have to pay, I will give you $1,000. So you buy it, you send it to me, give me your invoice, and I'll buy it off you for $1,000 more than you paid for it. You reckon it can be easy done? You're making the world's easiest $1,000. But here's the thing. I said, I'm in Australia. I can buy that fully tax-free for $11,000. So you want to take 30% off, you've got to sell it to me for $7,500.
Yeah.
Australian. And he said, no. 30% off is $10,000. And I said, no, that's just the US pricing. And that's just weirdness that's going on. I think a lot of JomaShop is actually just watches bought from outside America and shipped in.
Yeah, that wouldn't surprise me because there's obviously a lot of there's you can get great deals on the watches that you can get the best deals on, broadly speaking, are the ones where there's many different dial variations, or like the Aquaterra is on there, some of the Rados are on there, and some of the Breitlings at one time where there was multiple different versions within the model line. You can still get some. I mean, I bought off JomaShop. I mean, they're not a sponsor of this show, but I bought off them and always had a good experience. But I suppose I think should we move on to our next one?
Move on to the next one.
Well, then it's got to be the Breitling one, hasn't it? Well, I'll do my Breitling one afterwards.
Okay, I'm going to say the story of the year, the one that comes up and then goes away, but inevitably comes up again and has become a source of drama between channels. For me, 2022 is the year of, has the bubble burst on Rolex prices?
Yeah. It's so funny, isn't it? Yeah.
It's the question that keeps on, being asked. I got to the point where I was actually thinking of doing a video about, like, what are my emergency in case of glass? I've got to put something out, but I haven't thought of anything topics. And then has the Rolex price bubble burst was number one. It's like any week you could put that out and it would always be current. and it's always on people's minds, and it just will not go away.
Yeah. So this morning I was watching, it popped up in my feed. If I could afford one, and I can't, but if I could afford one, there is one car that I would love to own, and that's a Mercedes G-Wagon. I would love to own a G-Wagon.
Oh,
It looks like the old Land Rovers. I think it's really cool. It's really cool looking, but they're so expensive. And somebody made a video on essentially has the bubble burst on the Rolex G-Wagon. It's a car channel. They're not a watch channel. They do car con. And it followed the format of, okay, well, with the crash of Bitcoin, all the crypto bros are selling off their G-Wagons. There's this many on Auto Trader. And if you swapped out G-Wagon for Rolex Daytona, it would just play exactly the same. All this. Did you hear the 16,000 Rolex Daytonas on Chrono 24? Oh, all the crypto bros are selling their Rolex Daytonas. So it was such an amazing. It was just so funny. I was like, God, you could just re-edit this and just dub over Rolex Daytona, and it would play out exactly the same.
Yeah,
thing.
I do. And for me, it's Rolex is a really fascinating brand for me because I truly don't care. I don't want one. I don't have one. I don't want one. And that gives me a certain distance. I can sort of, I'm not invested in what happens. I'm just curious, but it is fascinating for me, just watching them as a business. But yeah, like I said, I think that is my that is the question of the year.
Yes, exactly. And I mean, I bought a Rolex in this year. As soon as March came around, Watches and Wonders, they released that the green dial date, just which I still absolutely love it. And then I managed to just wait it out on the waiting list, and it was certainly the price increase on most things was a result of like fear of missing out, wasn't it? And this like I need it now. This kind of Amazon type of, I can have it delivered the next day. But also with Rolex, with being so not opaque with their list, like how long would you have to wait for this on certain models? I mean, they were quite open and honest with me about, this will probably come in 3 months, they said to me, and I'm like, oh, okay, that'd be good. And it near enough 4 months, so they were honest about that. But it's certainly fed a frenzy. But I was on a podcast live stream with Roman Schaaf, and he said that a lot of the silly prices of the Daytonas were actually dealers selling to other dealers, that he felt that was the...
I was at a watch function a little while ago talking to a local Australian dealer, and he said exactly the same thing. He said that a lot of the prices and a lot of the sales he sees going backwards and forwards at the moment smell to him like dealer selling to dealer, even on places like Chrono 24. And he was the one who sort of put something to me. He said, for example, if you look at the graph on Chrono 24, they'll have like a sale price, but and what the average sale prices will be, but you will find literally dozens of brand new, say pick a one, Bat Girls or Batmen, Bat Boys, for sale from dealers, full box and paper, 5-star reviews, $5,000 less than what you're being told is the minimum sale price, and they just sit there. No one's buying them. And what's happening is dealers are exchanging between themselves at the higher prices to keep that graph in the right place. Anyway, I think we've done enough there.
Yeah, and I'll just agree with you. I know we're not supposed to be looking for a link, but this morning I was sort of cruising around. I forget whether it was which site it was on, but it was one of the resale sites. It might have been Crown and Caliber or something. But they literally had four or five of the rainbow Daytonas. I mean, they were selling them for like 250,000 a piece, but they had like 4 or 5 on them of them. So it was really weird because it's such an extremely rare watch that I think there's only one celebrity that owns one, but they had the rose gold and they had the white gold versions in, which was crazy. If I remember, I'll put the link in the description. Okay, my next one is the Superocean with the marshmallow on a stick hand.
Oh, fair enough. Yeah, I get it, and maybe in a sense that's maybe you just made Sylvain Bergeron and George Kern's day by saying you remember it. That's probably something they really want to know. So
yeah,
I'll be honest, and I totally get that people don't like it. I've got one, so I love it. But and possibly the reason I love it is because it's not trying. It's perfectly comfortable. It's perfectly comfortable with a whole bunch of people not liking it. It's not trying to be kind of something that's pleasant for everyone. I'm not going to say it's perfect. I'll get round to doing a review on it sooner or later. There's some things I would like to change. One of the things that they absolutely positively have to do is get rid of the renders on the website. The renders, it is so much better looking in photos than the render. That in particular, the render makes the track where they've got the minute track look kind of plain and featureless, when in fact it's got quite an interesting and subtle graining to it, which makes it much more interesting. And the case is way more complicated, and the finishing has much more contrast and particularly on the bronze version I've got. That I think they should absolutely get rid of those renders. They're appalling.
Yeah, I think the reason that I think I had such a reaction to this watch was that I've always considered the Superocean line as as a one that I would buy. I've always flirted with the idea of buying a Superocean. I liked the previous version, and when they released this version, there's just, to me, it seems like they had this great design, and then they were thinking, well, this isn't quite as distinctive as we want. This isn't quite what we need, something that will really wow people. And they fixated on this marshmallow on a stick hand. And the reason that I don't like it is because it just doesn't, to me, look in proportion with the rest of the watch. Even if it was the same size as the indices, so it kind of nicely covered the indices as it went back, but it just looks like it looks like a glitch on a photo or something. Or I've even seen it in person to try and convince myself that I liked it, but I don't know why it just offends me so much.
Yeah, and you and I have had this exchange before, and I'd say, and yet you like a snowflake, and I don't understand how you can like one but not the other. It's about the same size as a snowflake. It's just turned by 90 degrees.
Yeah,
or I think probably turned by 45 degrees.
Yeah, exactly. But the thing with snowflake hands is they're kind of the similar thickness, aren't they? They're the minute hand and the hour hand are similar thickness, and then it's got the snowflake. Whereas this looks like it's so narrow compared to the other hand that I don't even think it's immediately obvious that that's the minute hand when you're first glancing at it. But anyway, so that's my that was my story that I remember fondly reacting to from memory.
Yeah, really quickly, I'll just finish up on that. I actually own both of them. I own the old Superocean and I own the new one. And I think that they're fundamentally different watches. They're fundamentally different wearing experiences. And I do think that it's not so much they wanted to wow people. I think the old watch was, serious and deep diving and sort of, you got all very sober when you wore the old watch. It was 1,000 meters depth rating. It was big and thick and chunky, and the case was very simple. Over the last couple of years, Breitling have been shouting from the rooftops, we're fun and inclusive and casual, and this is a watch that you wear when you go surfing, not a watch that you wear when you go diving. And when you've got the two watches in your hand, it's just a totally different feel. It's 2 millimeters thinner. The case is so much more complex and decorative, and there's so much more light play. They're a fundamentally different watch. But anyway, that's enough on that one.
Now, I mean, you're getting a lot of love for your snowflake comment here. Mark's saying, if the Sunday show had gone longer, I would have added the snowflake to the list. And then Jack here saying hard pass on the snowflake hands as well. Yeah. I like this. I do like the snowflake hands.
Yeah. You know what? I'm thinking, what if you had maybe that's why Tudor can't have a Cyclops, because if the snowflake went under the Cyclops, the world would stop spinning on its axis. People would just drop dead like in the street.
Totally
too much ugly.
Go on then. What's your next one from memory that a drama that you still think of?
Okay, so this is probably my biggest performing. It's similar to your issue before. My biggest performing, best performing video, got the most watches, got the most likes, most dislikes, most arguments with me, and arguments that are still going on. A lot of people, because they either didn't watch the whole video, or they responded to the part of the video they hated, which was my reaction to the Tudor releases at Watches and Wonders, where I said, effectively, this was a great this was a great release that is going to go gangbusters for Tudor, and I hate it.
It's funny because, I mean, just to go into that, because the releases that were interesting that we're thinking back on watches, aren't we? Because the releases that I remember from Tudor, there's only one from Watches and Wonders I can actually remember, because the other two significant ones were actually released not at Watches and Wonders, were they? They were sort of piecemeal through the year.
Yeah, there was Ranger, the Pelagos one. Yeah, actually, to be honest, I was thinking about this in a way. It was a kind of a big Tudor year. And so I was really thinking very hard about the Watches and Wonders one, because that one video, and it really did, it really ignited something, that another topic that ran through the year, sort of at a lower level, was, and I've joked about it here, but it has been a bigger issue, has Tudor simply become a homage brand? And Watch Chris did a video at the time where he was talking about that. I did a video, and that was one of the reasons why I kind of didn't like the release, but also why I said it was going to be super popular, because there's a bunch of people who love Tudor for the fact, the whole basis of Tudor, and they're really quick to tell me that I don't understand. Tudor's not a homage brand. It was always created to be the alternative to Rolex. And I respond by going, and that is exactly why I hate it. It's the Prince Andrew of the royal family.
Oh, I'm a fan of Tudor. I like what they've done. I like what they've done with the BlackBerry Pro. But you're right. I haven't bought a Tudor this year. So I like what they've done, but I haven't made that leap to buy one. There's not one that I've really liked, because I mean, liked enough to spend. I mean, I like the BlackBerry Pro, but obviously it's a little bit thicker. I think the new 39mm Pelagos is fantastic, but for some reason they took the date off it. So that immediately, I like the date on a watch, and I know if I was spending that much money, because I bought the BlackBerry 58 and it didn't have the date on it, and it just annoyed me. So I ended up selling that one. But I mean, leading into this, I suppose my next one then could be the Tudor Ranger, because it seemed to be built up quite a lot. It seemed to be they did quite a lot on their website, didn't they? Like, they kind of a little build up. There's like a countdown clock, and then it seemed that when it was released, there was like a flurry of interest, but it dissipated a lot faster than I think some of the other, because I can't think of anybody who mentions Tudor Ranger.
Oh, actually there is, and I think It's really the Tudor Ranger for me is an example of where it's kind of like how do I put it? I think it's done exactly what Tudor thought it was going to do. And I think it has fulfilled exactly the role it's supposed to fulfill. But I think that the marketing didn't reflect it. And they marketed it as this big thing that was going to be really quite, important to the watch community. They did the whole teaser thing and we all got very excited. When in fact, I think the Tudor Ranger was always one for the fans. It was a watch which they knew wasn't going to sell in huge numbers. I have a suspicion that's why it's priced incredibly competitively, because they know they're not going to make and sell a lot. But it's one for the fans. It's one for the true believers. And if you come back to, just lost all sound, I take it.
Sorry, I lost the audio. Apologies.
Yeah, no, that's okay. But what I was saying is, I think that the Tudor Ranger is a watch for the true believers of the Tudor, club. And you were saying before you haven't heard anyone talk about it on a bunch of podcasts for people that love. Someone else in the comments, there you go, Mark Wheeler called it the most boring watch released in 2022. Couldn't agree more. But certainly from my comments, I got a lot of people saying, yeah, that's true. And that's why I love it. I love a boring watch. I want something, really plain Jane. I don't want anything excitement. I want my watch to be a virtual beta blocker.
Yeah, it's funny because some of I've got a friend that works at a Tudor store, so big shout out to Justin if he's watching this. He's been on the show a few times, and it's funny because I'll go in and ask him periodically what people are into, and he said that actually it's been a real shift recently. That at the start of the year, very much was Tudor chronographs. Everybody was asking about the Tudor chrono, and then everybody was asking about the Ranger, and then now he's saying that in fact everybody's asking about the FXD and the Pelagos, and he actually had multiple of the chronos in the store. This is the store in Orlando. And so it shows that perhaps, I wonder if the releases from this year, Tudor's struggled to have one that has like a consistent runway where there's a constant demand for it, or whether they're just having these because they're doing such amazing releases each time. Are people like, oh, maybe I'll just wait till the next to see what they're going to do next time? Whereas Rolex, obviously, you could wait and certainly see what they released at Watches and Wonders, but I don't think that would compel you to. Or having said that, I was compelled from Watches and Wonders. But if you wanted a date, you probably wouldn't wait for Watches and Wonders to see what else happened. Whereas Tudor, I don't know whether there's perhaps something with that because they have kind of shock and awe each time.
It could be. My theory on Tudor is that we in the watch community massively overestimate how big, important, and actually how popular Tudor is.
Oh, you think?
Yeah. If you, we talk about Tudor as though, and because they're part of Rolex and they do have one or two, they do have that Black Bay line that everyone really loves, and we really focus in on that watch. But and then because of the Rolex relationship and because of a whole bunch of other things that get spoken about by a lot of YouTubers, and we all covered it because if you do a Tudor video, you're going to get a lot of clicks. But if you go to that Morgan and Stanley, what I call the Watch World Cup review that comes out every year, Tudor is nothing special. It's not in the top 10. I think it's down around number 15. It doesn't sell a huge amount of watches. The average price of its watches is about the same price as the average tag, which means that the vast majority of what they sell is actually, what are those 1942s, or, they're really simple ETA-based watches, and the Royals.
They're beautiful date just Tudors.
That's right.
Beautiful.
That is the real Tudor. And I get the feeling that the actual number of people that truly buy Black Bays is significantly smaller than we think. And what you
Yeah,
do is you get these chokes where they come out, they get really hyped. Lots of people do videos, they race out, and the Tudor Black Bay Blue. Remember when that came out in the frenzy? 7 months after that came out, my local is a vintage and secondhand watch dealer, had 7 in the window and was knocking people back saying, I just won't buy any more. Because people just get in this frenzy, and I think it's the Rolex relationship and a whole bunch of other things. And yeah, I don't think Tudor are as big as people think.
yeah, it's funny. I mean, I would say that I've certainly seen more Black Bays in the wild than I have other. I mean, apart from Rolex, than most other. I have noticed the Black Bay 58. I had a Black Bay 58 for a while, but the fact it didn't have a date on it, and also the thing with the bracelet was kind of it kind of annoyed me a bit. I bought it on the NATO. I really wanted it on the bracelet, but they would that you could get it on the bracelet for a long time. So I did end up selling it. So it's interesting that you say that. Yeah, did I? Yeah, because I sold it probably. I hadn't owned it a year, I don't think. But yeah, so it's an interesting conversation. But what's your next one? Can you remember?
Well, that was my last one. That was Tudor. So now it's your turn.
So my one has to be, and it's funny because it's very apt that it happened today as well, is the age of the limited edition frenzy on the G-Shocks. So the Bamford G-Shock in particular, where we the frenzy happened with on a smaller scale because they only released it in one store. And they've done it today as well. Hodinkee have just done the 3rd John Mayer limited edition, released today, and it's completely sold out again. And it was $180 for what is in effect, because the Bamford one, all 3 of the John Mayer ones, they're the bog standard 6900. They're not solar. They're not, they're not. Price is purely reflective on on the name brand recognition. So I wonder whether next year we'll see more of that. I mean, John Mayer's on his 3rd now, but his second one, his first one looked awesome. He did a second one where it was white, and those readily available on eBay. But this sort of a baby blue version. But it's interesting because Swatch sort of did it a bit with the MoonSwatch, where they built that hype, but a G-Shock is arguably significantly better made. But I don't know, it just doesn't fit right. First of all, it doesn't sit right to me that Hodinkee is selling these limited edition watches. They're making limited edition watches that should be affordable, but they're making them scarce. That kind of rubs me up the wrong way a little bit, because you know that they could knock out 10,000 of those watches probably within the space of a couple of days. I'm speculating, but they've got the machine. But I don't know. What's your view on that? Do you think we'll see more of these celebrity G-Shocks? Do you like them? Or
well, one, I'm not a G-Shock guy, so whenever something's associated with work for me, it really ruins it. So it's really funny. I got issued a G-Shock back in 1989 by the Air Force, and so for me, it just reminds me of work. It's like my safety boots and high vis gear. So it's yeah, I'm not the guy to ask about G-Shocks. I think that I feel like the John Mayer ones have been a little lazy of late. I agree with you. I felt the first one was kind of fun. It's funny. I don't follow Hodinkee that much anymore. I've kind of, which is actually going to be my next topic. I'll hold fire on that. But I would say that I've had a feeling that the gloss is what is rubbing off a lot of limited editions in general, but Hodinkee ones especially. From what I understand, the last Zodiac, which was actually a really nice watch, I really quite liked, their Pan Am Zodiac limited edition. That was a nice watch, really well executed, good price. It wasn't like they weren't really smashing you for the price. and it took a while to sell. And in fact, there you go. Is it still available?
Still available. Yeah, still available. Yeah.
So I found myself wondering, is the gloss coming off a little bit? The Hodinkee, limited edition.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, because I've noticed it. I've noticed it with a few, because this Zodiac is obviously priced reasonably, but there was a few others, like they did that Ben Roos, the Type 1, that they didn't sell out on that. There's been a few recently. You're right. There was an age when they could do anything, couldn't they? That travel clock that was $5,000, and the the other stuff as well that they. Here we go. It's this. I think it's if we hit unlimited here. I wonder if this Mido is still available as well. But yeah, there's been a few recently where I wonder if this Mido is still. Oh, that's still available. That was a distinctive one. Yeah, you're right. Maybe they're not turning everything. They're not got the Midas touch anymore. I wonder if that Hamilton's still. Yeah, that Hamilton, that was a big deal at the time, wasn't it, as well? The double box of Hamilton watches.
Yeah, so that's been something that's been sort of nagging at me a little bit. I haven't really followed it up, but it seems like, they found their way of making sure we all got one by somehow becoming so uncool, no one rushes out to buy them anymore.
Yeah, it's funny.
Maybe that's how they're going to do it. We're not going to have limited times, and we're not going to have we're just going to make ourselves so on the nose you don't want to buy from us anymore.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I suppose the other story as well is the kind of decline of Hodinkee, but they'll probably do okay with the demographic they're going after. The decline of Hodinkee for watch collectors maybe was a big thing, wasn't it, halfway through the year when Jack Forster left?
Absolutely. I think that was going to be one of my next topics. That was going to be like my next thing I remember was, one of my most popular videos again was, Hodinkee is dead. And then in brackets, at least to watch geeks. They still do good stuff. They still have some interesting articles. Anthony Trainer, the guy who used to do the Rescapement, I think, newsletter, they brought him on. He's interesting. I like his writing, but they've gone from a place where I used to always, I would go to Hodinkee to see what they were saying, and I would read a lot of articles on the off chance that this was probably going to be interesting to me. To now, I'll wait for someone else. I'll wait for someone else to tell me that there's an interesting article on Hodinkee, and then I'll go check it out. And if I do go, because this is what I do for, I was going to say for a living, because this is what I do for a pittance every month, running a YouTube channel, I kind of put it in the heading of, okay, so I do, research. I find myself scanning through going, don't care about so many of their articles now.
I'm exactly the same. I even had a skim before just to see if there was anything that was of interest to me, but there's really, there's nothing they've obviously done a few articles, and obviously a lot of these articles now are based on watches that they're selling. But you're right, there's nothing that's really gripped me. These watches we love but wouldn't wear is, it's just. You could probably guess a lot of these from the watches that were released this year, but it leaves me a bit cold. But I still like reading Watch Pro quite a bit. I'll go on a blog to watch as well, because there's sometimes opinion pieces, isn't there, that are good. But I tend just to listen to Scottish Watches mostly to get the watch news, and then
I must admit that would probably be I think podcasts are changing a little bit too. I still listen to Scottish Watches. I've got a couple of other favorites that I like to listen to. But I think sort of, I'm not sure what's happening with we'll call it watch media at the moment. I feel like this year we've kind of, no one has stepped up. There's no big new performer who's like blowing us away. A few old and bolds have sort of started to drop back. Orange Hand just said Fratello, and I think that's true. I think Fratello are doing well, but and the word there I'd say is still. They're kind of treading water. They're still good, but they're not stepping up and becoming more. It's just, I feel like it's been a bit of a year of stasis in the watch media world.
I totally agree with you. There's even some of the bigger YouTube channels that I used to watch frequently, but I don't watch them anymore. But having said that, I mean, some of them were the drama based one. I used to like the Timepiece Gentleman, and then when that split into Grand Caliber and when they sort of separate ways, I still used to watch it because I used to like the kind of seeing the wheeling and dealing of the high end sort of stuff, but it soon kind of lost its luster for me a bit. So I only watch a handful of channels now. But yeah, it's definitely interesting. I mean, I still love doing the live streams, but you're right, Pete. If I was doing content on like, Seiko or Tudor or who are the other ones that do well? Christopher Ward ones do well, and Rolex stuff. Like, if I just did Rolex content, I would probably grow the channel a lot faster. But I think you've got to really do what you enjoy doing, haven't you? When it's not.
Yeah. I've joked about one day buying a Rolex just so I could talk about it on the channel. Unfortunately, you can't do it anymore. There was parts of me that I wanted to buy a Rolex Cellini Dual Time, only so that when people said you're just anti-Rolex because you haven't got one, I could say, no, I've got one. I've got this Cellini.
It's funny because your fellow countryman Jody at Just One More Watch, he basically did a video on why you wouldn't buy a Rolex, and it's still, I think, his best performing one. I looked the other day; it's got like 3 million views on it. So I think you just need to do one about why you wouldn't buy a Rolex, and then
I've done that video. Someone asked me. It was on my it was just a rolled it into a Q&A video, and someone asked me the question of, do you like a Rolex Submariner? Do you like the watch? And so, it was a Q&A about I think there was a dozen topics, but of course the thumbnail was why I don't like the Rolex Submariner, and it was super popular.
Yeah. It's funny because I think it's got that mentality of, which is, I think, I mean, I enjoyed the Timepiece Gentleman at the start, but I think what perhaps the chink in the armor for them is that there's a certain group of people that like to, that especially like Rolexes, they're expensive, so people like to hear that they're not good, don't they? They like to hear that these are very expensive. And the same with the Timepiece Gentleman was like, well, they seem to be at one time doing very well, and I'm sure he's doing well now, Anthony. They seem to be doing very well at one point. So when there was a little chink in the armor, people went for it, and they're like, we knew this wasn't all, and it was above board. It's just that they made some silly marketing decisions, but they kind of. Yeah, people seemed quick to jump on that kind of bandwagon, weren't they, with it? But
yeah, I think so. It was funny. I watched very little. Well. Yeah, I watched very little of his channel. I did a video about the what happened, because what happened, it was a little bit like Rolex. I didn't have a dog in the fight, but on the other hand, what happened was kind of interesting. It was curious. After I did that video, I ended up talking to a friend of mine who is a grey market dealer. And he was saying that there was some of that stuff you were talking about with, some silly marketing and some silly buying and selling decisions. TPG had actually, Timepiece, yeah, that's who they were. They actually they had a bit of a reputation amongst other buyers of other dealers of being a bit reckless and paying over the odds. And so when it all went kind of strange for a little while, he said, we didn't feel that there was anything underhanded going on, but they had got themselves into he was unsurprised that they had to do a bit of a reset. because just the way they had been trading was a little different and a little unusual and probably wasn't quite working. For me, for me, money is sort of something that we have to deal with. They won't accept coconut shells for watches, so you have to pay them in real money. But I don't really like the buying and selling part of it. That's just something that's got to be done. It's the dirty bit of this business. So if I watch any of those Roman Shaft guys, for me, it just I get. Not only do I get no enjoyment out of it, it makes me look at my watches in a less pleasant way. I don't.
Oh yeah, I don't mind.
There was a video the other day, and there you go. You're a Datejust fan, so there was a video. It was a short, and I was really curious about it. So it's one of these guys. I don't know what channel it was. I don't know who it was, but it's Roman Shaft style guy. And it's him going into one of these wholesalers, grey market Rolex wholesalers, saying, "I'm after a Datejust in this family," and he gives a reference number. And the wholesaler literally reaches under the desk and then drops a $2 shop plastic container of maybe 50 watches in little plastic baggies, just saying, "Pick the one you want." And it's like, you just sucked all the joy out of this. I need to go have a shower before I go look at my watches again.
Yeah, I think that's the thing that Roman Shaft does better than the Timepiece Gentleman. Although, I don't know, Marco kind of knew his watches, didn't he? But Roman Shaft will at least talk about why a watch is so unique before you get into the dollars and cents of it, I think, but yeah, that was definitely, because the Timepiece Gentleman thing, I think that was even last year, wasn't it? Wasn't that 2021 or 2022? I don't think it was this year, but it was.
No, it definitely wasn't this year. That was previously.
Well, that's been great. I'm wondering whether we've got anything. Is there any other? I just think a lot of people are just talking about some of the subjects they're agreeing with us. Yeah, saying that TPG's got a bit boring now. Did you have any more, Pete, or should we draw a close?
Yeah, that's it for me off memory. I can't think of any other big topics without doing some research, which is kind of flying in the face of the premise.
Yeah, exactly. It was a lot of fun. Thank you everyone for joining. If you joined late, we were having a discussion before the show about big news things that happened this week in the watch world, or sorry, this year in the watch world, and whether we could remember them, especially the ones that we got worked up about or made videos on. Could we still remember them? Do we still have a memory of them? So that was the premise of this show. But thank you everyone for being so active in the comments. Pete, thank you for joining me.
No, love this.
Yeah, absolutely. So yes, me too. So check out Pete's channel, the Pete McConville channel, or if you search for Not So Obvious Watches, you will find it on YouTube. And we will see you all next time on the Sunday show, on the Sunday Social. So thanks for watching, everyone, and we'll see you next time. Bye.
Okay. See ya.